to order. I want to thank everybody for coming in today. This is one of those last minute things that I thought you guys needed to be brought up to speed on. Before we get too far into this, Meg had sent out all of the minutes for February 3rd through March 6th. I hope all of you have had a chance to review those. They kind of came in two separate batches. Does anybody have any objection to the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Motion by Representative Essex, second by Representative Helgerson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, with that, I'll give you guys a little bit of a setup. There's a Senate Bill 119 that the Senate plans to work this afternoon. It regards treasurer's fees. There's been a lot of conversation in the last couple of days. As often happens around here, sometimes something comes up in a conference. I don't know that it will, but if it does, I want to make sure all of you are briefed on it and understand the ramifications of the bill. So with that, I'll open an informational briefing on Senate Bill 119. And Chris, would you give us an overview, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, as the chairman stated, Senate Bill 119 is currently in the Senate. I'm going to be briefing how the bill was passed out of committee and where it stands, and it's above the line today on Senate GO. So Senate Bill 119 would increase the amount of fees retained by a county treasurer, the Division of Vehicles, or a contractor of the division for processing motor vehicle license applications and certificate of title applications. Currently, KSA 8-145, which is the statute that the bill amends, authorizes a county treasurer, division, or contractor of the division to retain 75 cents for each license application processed and $2 for each certificate of title application that's processed. The entity performing the service is entitled to deposit those retained fees into special funds to help pay for the necessary help and expenses in performing such duties. What the bill does is raise the amount that can be retained by those entities. For the license applications, that amount increased from 75 cents to $5.75. And for the certificate of title fees, the amount retained would increase from $2 to $3.50. The increased amounts would still be deposited into those special funds for the same purposes. The provisions would go into effect July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions for the reviser? Okay. Seeing none. Also in your file, everybody, we've got the fiscal note that shows it would be as it's currently written, it would be a $16.2 million hit to the State Highway Fund. And we've also included a copy of the supplemental note for you to review. All right, with that, we'll start out with testimony on the bill as it sits in the House right now. Oh, and just as a clarification to some of the newer members, you cannot have a hearing on a bill unless it's been assigned to your committee. This bill is not even in the House yet, and that's why it's called an informational briefing. But we'll handle it very much like we would a normal bill hearing. And because of the testimony and some people needing to get to other places, we'll hold questions until the end, if any of you have them. So with that, the first person testifying today will be Shiloh Hager. She's the county treasurer of Riley County. Welcome to the committee, Shiloh.
Speak today regarding Senate Bill 119. As I said, I'm Shiloh Hager, the Riley County Treasurer, and I'm also the legislative chair for the Kansas County Treasurers Association. Just for your information, county treasurers work as an agent of the state, of the Department of Revenue, providing state-mandated services, titling and registering vehicles. The fees that we get to retain to do this work no longer covers the cost of the operations, and almost every county in the state are having to subsidize this work with ad valorem tax dollars. Since the implementation of the movers title and registration system in 2012, additional work and costs have been transferred from the Department of Revenue to the counties with no corresponding changes in revenues. County treasurers took over the role of title approving, which had previously been done by the Department of Revenue, and many counties had to hire additional staff to fill this role. In addition, we've become responsible for maintaining all of the computers and all the equipment that is associated with this new, this operating system. I say new, it's now almost 12 years old. The revenues that we retain are based on the number of transactions that we perform. And in many counties, the transactions count remains flat. Therefore, the revenue remains flat. However, as all of you know, the inflation and costs are only going up. So over the years, our losses have continued to grow. Last year, we interviewed we asked for information from all of the county treasurers, and we received 52 responses. And then we extrapolated what those losses for the entire state would be. And in 2024, it was an $11 million shortfall that was being subsidized by the counties. And we estimate that that loss will be as much as $13 million by the year 2029. The county treasurers have worked tirelessly over the last at least 10 years trying to find a solution to this funding problem, from trying to look on rewriting what the fee structure looks like. We've looked at adding a county service fee, and we did get a facility fee that many counties are currently using, but that's not even beginning to touch the problem. We also have gotten some pushback as far as having fee increases. So what this bill does is it just reallocates the fees that we're currently collecting, and it will provide I'm going to say some relief to the problem without any fee increase to the customer. This proposed bill provides enough money so that about 70% of the counties are made whole. There's still about 30% of the counties that will still remain underfunded, Riley County being one of them. But when we were trying to come up with what that dollar amount looked like, we needed to be responsible and not make it too high so that many counties had a big windfall, but it covered as many counties as possible. And from our perspective, anything is better than nothing right now. Property tax relief is very important to the counties, as it is to the legislators. And this bill would allow the motor vehicle operations to be funded by the fees we collect and reduce the amount that is being covered by ad valorem tax dollars. Without this change, counties may need to continue to fund the operation with county tax dollars, which could potentially mean an increase in the mill levy. Or, like some counties are currently experiencing, some counties may begin reducing staff and services, which will lead to customer dissatisfaction. I know of a couple examples. Saline County is one. Their commissioners have required them to maintain their costs using just the motor vehicle fees, and they've closed an annex, which has caused a lot of turmoil in Saline County. I know our Sedgwick County treasurer has reported to us that her commissioners have also passed a resolution that they will not fund the motor vehicle operations with ad valorem tax dollars, and they are looking at potential cuts as well. Like I said, this bill doesn't completely solve the funding problem, but it is a start. And if it is passed, it'll give us a starting point to hopefully continue conversations with the legislature and the Department of Revenue to help develop a more permanent solution going forward that will provide the funding needed to run the motor vehicle operations without using ad valorem tax dollars. The county treasurers are very proud of the work that we provide to our constituents, and we would like to continue to provide this high level of service going forward, but we need your help to do so. With that, I will answer questions when it is appropriate.
Thank you, Shiloh. Yeah, if everybody will please try to make notes, and we'll save the questions till the end. Next person to present on the bill is Thomas Franzen, the County Treasurer for Johnson County Treasurer's Office. Welcome to the committee, Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Chairman Francis and committee members. I am Tom Franzen. I'm the Johnson County Treasurer, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 119, which, as you heard from Shiloh, reallocates current statutory fees to better fund the county treasurers as we provide a state-mandated service. You have a copy of my testimony there, so I won't belabor with all of the points in there, but just to summarize, Senate Bill 119 does three things. It enhances revenue at the local level where the vast majority of the work is being performed. It also provides property tax relief by reducing ad valorem tax revenues currently needed to subsidize the operations. And third, it keeps the same total fee amount paid by our customers. So the treasurers think this is a solution that makes sense for many stakeholders. Johnson County, as with most of the counties across the state, are losing money on this operation. This has been an ongoing problem. This is not going away, and it's also a growing problem. It doesn't stay the same. It continues to increase each year. We said in our testimony, across the state of Kansas, based on the information Shiloh provided, it looks like about an $11 million gap of local property tax support that's going to fund that. In Johnson County, that gap in 2024 was $2.3 million. So understand, this is one of the most important services we provide in our community. Through the surveys we do within the community, the feedback is this is an important service. And while the satisfaction is higher than many other services at the county level, that satisfaction is declining. And it's declining because we're not able to provide the service levels that our customers are accustomed to and that we would like to provide. So this is an important issue for us. And I also wanted to follow up on the comments Shiloh made about the statutory fees. When this process was transferred to the treasurers, I'm not sure we had a full appreciation around the growing costs associated with the operation. A lot of things have changed since 2012. The fee that is supposed to support county treasurers is the county service fee. That's the biggest fee. That's the primary fee. That's a $5 fee. That fee has not been changed for county treasurers since 2007. The other primary fee for county treasurers for the lion's share of work we do is with regards to titling a vehicle. The fee for titling a vehicle is $10. The county treasurer's portion of that is only $2, and the treasurers are doing the vast majority of that work. That fee for county treasurers has not changed since 1982. So when you just stop and think about it, the model is woefully outdated. The treasurers are willing to continue to look at a model that makes sense and is sustainable long-term, and we are working with the Department of Revenue and the legislature, and we will do that. As Shiloh mentioned, this is a great first step, just starting to reallocate the fees that are currently on the books, but by no means is that the answer because all treasurers are not taken care of. This is a state function administered locally, and we want to do right by the state and by our residents, but we need the money to provide that service. So obviously, we're supportive of the bill. Look forward to also continuing to work to find a sustainable model long-term. And want to again thank the chairman and the committee for listening on the informational hearing today and be ready to stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you, Tom, for your testimony. With that being said, the next person testifying today will be Senator Elaine Bowers. There's been some concern in the Senate that the funding source is the state highway fund. Taking $16 million out of the highway fund directly impacts projects across the state as the highway department continues to work with concerns with construction inflation and also the fact that our fuel tax revenues remain flat from 2003, just like the registration fees have remained flat for 20 or 30 years. So Senator Bowers, when it is on the floor today, has a proposed amendment that she would like to share with the committee. Welcome to the committee, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. And I see my staff. I have Jill Shelley here, who even pulled together a little information of the proposed fund. where what we're going to exchange from the state highway fund. So if you want to dive deeper into that, we have a little research there. And Chris helped us write this amendment, so thank you, Chris. But we did discover after February 11th that we needed to hold more conversations. So with the Department of Revenue and my friends here behind me, we have also the Treasurer Association, the Kansas Contractors, some of my leadership, we all gathered into a room and acknowledged we have a problem. The treasurers have tried for the last 6 years to find an answer. Raising fees on the Senate side is not very popular. So what is our solution? We think we still have more conversations to come down the road. And your chairman was in the room with us too. So everything you heard here, we're going to tweak some of this. So the amendment will reallocate money to the state highway fund from the commercial vehicle fee fund paid by the out-of-state, over-the-road trucking companies, trucks, and it's approximately $12 million. And that's the amount that's going straight into the state general fund right now. It's not the original amount the treasurer is asking for, but it'll cover about 75% of what they collect and deliver to us Kansans. The amendment and the bill will not increase title and registration fees, as just mentioned before me. By the way, they haven't had an increase since 2003. And if anywhere I'm not quite right, Chris, you hop in and help me, but you'll see. And do you have the amendment, Mr. Chair? I think we, okay, good. So.
Everybody has the amendment in their file.
Okay.
It looks like, yes,
Yeah.
it's a little bit unclear, but yeah, they've got it.
So you'll see a lot of technical adjustments, and that's where we might need Chris's help to KSA 8-143M, the statute being inserted for the change in commercial vehicle fees to the state highway fund rather than SGF. You'll find the substantive change for that fund switch in subsection D1 at the bottom of the page 2, and the decrease of the fees kept by the county treasurer at the bottom of page 3. And the rest of the amendment is technical. So just another way, section 1 eliminates January 2014 date in the first paragraph, plus technical amendments. And the real policy change on page 2, the very last sentence where it amends to the credit of the state, cross off general highway fund. You'll see the fees reduced from the original SB 19 to reflect about $12 million from the original request of $16 million. That's it in a nutshell. And Chris, do you need to clean up anything that I said? I've tried to get my head around this. It is fascinating to know that this commercial vehicle fee fund that Jill discovered was in 2012. So that is when that fund was established. And your chairman was in the room with us. This has been an idea that we've not really scoped out in a bill or an amendment, so we'll try this today in the Senate. And just understanding we have more work to do on how we help our county treasurers. In fact, with the Department of Revenue, when we sat down with them, 13% of their budget comes from this process. So perhaps when we do the next transportation plan, we're looking at another way that we still address the shortage, but this is a good start, we think.
And Senator, do you have, can you stay for questions afterwards? Or do
Yeah, I
you
can
need
stay,
to ask for questions now?
Yeah.
And
No, I can stay. And it helps me because I'm going to be talking about this in my caucus and then on the floor. So I'm happy to hear what you all think as well. So I'll stay with you.
thank you very much. Next, we'll have testimony from the Kansas Contractors Association by Mr. Michael White. Welcome to the committee, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Is this on? Okay. It's blue. Yeah, it's on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michael White, Executive Director of the Kansas Contractors Association. We appeared as neutral on this bill on the Senate side, and predominantly you'll see in my testimony, it's because of the hit to the highway fund of $16 million. Since that hearing, we've kept in contact and communicated closely with our friends in the treasurer's offices and their lobbyists. We have, as the senator said, we had a meeting last week to discuss. Department of Revenue was in there with us. One solution that was thrown out initially was a transfer, to reduce the transfer to the Department of Revenue They actually, they get a transfer in one way that the cost would have been offset. After those conversations took place, that was not a feasible option at this point. And so the chairman and I, the dollars that we're talking about here are the only registration fees that are collected by the state of Kansas that don't go into the highway fund. For whatever reason, statutorily, they've always been set up where they went to the state general fund. And so they are registration fees. We've always advocated and thought they belonged in the highway fund. We're perfectly fine with this solution. I think this year, those registration fees collected about 11.2 million. The change in the bill that we've agreed to at the treasurer's would make it about a $12 million hit to the highway fund, but you have 11.2 million coming in, so it's a little bit less than $1 million that we would be losing from the highway fund. Those are based off of last year's numbers. Obviously, those things fluctuate all the time a little bit. But we are in support of this bill as it moves forward with the amendment, assuming the amendment is put on in the Senate today. We anticipate that. I don't know that there's a lot of heartburn on the Senate for the amendment. Obviously, you never know till the debate's over. But we are supportive if this measure comes over to you guys with this amendment that Senator Bowers is referring to. And as we've talked about, as I've stated previously, registration fees are one of those things that are stagnant. And I definitely think in the next program, we need to be talking about how we can do something to make them not stagnant over the next program. You guys will remember, if you've been around here at any length of time, every few years we're talking about registration fees. And it's because they are stagnant and they're not keeping up with the rate of inflation and all the things that go into keeping our infrastructure superb. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Joel Skelly with the Kansas Department of Transportation. Welcome to the committee, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman mentioned, my name is Joel Skelly, Director of Policy with Kansas Department of Transportation. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I see several people in green. I actually didn't even think about it, and I do have green on. I got to work and I was like, oh yeah, this worked out for the best for me. Anyway, you have our written testimony already, so I just want to hit on a few of the key points here. As the chairman already mentioned, there is a $16 million annual hit as the bill is currently worded to the State Highway Fund. That translates into about $80 million over the remainder of Ike, which is a significant amount for us to consider as we're moving through and trying to finish strong with the Ike program. Just like the contractors we did in the Senate Transportation Committee come in neutral, wanting to work with the interested parties, we do recognize there's a cost to collecting these revenues that do come in and help us do investments to the highway system and the state transportation network. So, but there is a cost that's associated with collecting those. So we recognize that needs to be met. Really maintaining the funding levels as closely as we can to what we have now in the State Highway Fund is critically important to actually completing Ike in a strong fashion. We really I want to make note of this, is that we are really appreciative of the governor and for the legislature in reducing and eliminating actually all of the extraordinary transfers that were happening earlier on. We are now in, I think, our third year consecutively where we do not have any extraordinary transfers. The only transfers that happen are the ones that are planned for those highway purposes or transportation purposes. So that is a good thing. We, again, are very appreciative of your efforts to make sure that that has stayed the same. I want to make note that any additional transfers that we weren't anticipating will have an impact, as I'd mentioned. And so it does diminish our ability ultimately to complete Ike strong, and it could potentially have a cause for projects that are in the development pipeline currently to have us either delay those projects from getting into the construction pipeline or even moving them back further in getting them completed. The other piece that I'll just quickly mention here is that we do believe that the funding that comes to help cover these costs really shouldn't come at the expense of any agency's operating budget. Understand that there is the cost to that, but we want to make sure that this is something that we find a solution to make sure that that doesn't have a negative impact on how people are currently operating. As was noted, the Senate has come together with a lot of the parties to really come up with a solution. We're supportive of this solution. Again, as the contractors, as Michael had said, this is something that it's a bit of an anomaly with those registration fees, that it doesn't actually go into the highway fund. This predates me in my position here with the DOT, so I'm not exactly even sure how that came to be, where it was actually going to the general fund instead of the highway fund. So I can't answer those questions, but we do feel that that would be an appropriate direction for where those revenues would go, and would then help cover some of these costs and allow us to have ongoing discussions, as we have commented here in this chamber and in this room, about the fact that there are needs to discuss how we fund transportation in the future, because we do see those revenues declining or stagnating. And so as that happens, investment in the transportation system continues to go up. The costs of materials, the cost of labor, the cost of everything that we do goes up substantially. As a matter of fact, since COVID, we've had a significant spike just through inflation and other costs, that the costs or the revenues are not able to keep up with that. So we recognize that, and we have to look at all of the tools in the toolkit to be able to try and help fund those transportation investments that are critical and important to all of our Kansas residents, from just a personal level to an economic level. So with that, I will stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you very much, Joel. And batting cleanup today, we have Ted Smith with Department of Revenue. Welcome to the committee, Ted.
Thank you, Chairman Francis. Can you hear me? Very good. Members of the committee, my name's Ted Smith with the Department of Revenue Chief Counsel. But for most of my 20 years working with the Department of Revenue, I've worked in motor vehicles and property tax, which puts me in contact with the county treasurers quite routinely. I'm here today to maybe tell you a little bit about the history of the title work performed by the county treasurers, and why that work has gotten a little bit more intensive compared to the way it was 15 or 20 years ago. Provide you with some context. But before that, I want to just talk about Senator Bauer's amendment suggestion, and maybe give you a little bit of background on this weird little $11 to $12 million of commercial motor vehicle fees that go to the state general fund, which is really an anomaly, because most of the money we collect from the Department of Revenue goes to the state highway fund, especially when it comes to vehicles. For our purposes, we basically collect and allocate to the state highway fund between $1.3 billion to $1.6 billion a year. And about 10 or 11% of that has to do with these motor vehicle fees that our county treasurer partners collect day in, day out. But the interesting thing about this $11 or $12 million that Senator Bowers is talking about is that goes back about 10 or 12 years, when we basically changed the way that we assess property tax on a strange subset of commercial motor vehicles that are associated with fleets. At the time, it was ad valorem, so it was sort of awkward. It wasn't tag and tax like you do with regular vehicles. What it was it was sort of taxed like a 25% assessed level. And it was all over the place. And a lot of fleet operators in Kansas would basically have their inventory out of state, so that it didn't trigger these property tax classifications. So this committee, I think it would have been Senator Prell at the time, and Deanne worked on this idea that, well, we may reduce the property tax collected for the counties a little bit. We believe that there'll be more vehicles brought into the state that we can tax. And I think that's borne out. Now, for most of these commercial motor vehicles over 10,000 pounds, our county treasurer partners help us with the processing of that. And most of that money basically stays in the local jurisdiction, the local county, to basically support their property tax on personal property. Now, this 11 or 12, $13 million is a weird little offset, because those vehicles don't have any connection to Kansas. They're not connected to a specific county, but the fleet operator may have 100 other vehicles that are associated with Kansas. And so they said, yeah, this is out of state, but it'll help me dealing with you, the state of Kansas, rather than these other state partners. So that's sort of where that 11 or $12 million is. And I think Chairman Francis and Senator Bowers are saying it's just a weird little remainder that's not specifically tied to a specific county. And that's really unique. But going to the broader history here, again, Representative Goddard, you've been around long enough. You remember when we did it with Chairman Hazlitt. Same goes with you. Representative Wilborn, when you were a senator, you remember that in 2008, 2009, we worked forward with a modernization effort. That went into production in 2012. The county treasurers were partners with us all the way. But one of the consequences of that, before 2012, what would happen is the county treasurers would basically initially review the title application, and they would mail everything to the Department of Revenue, right? And then at the same time that they were basically taking that initial application, they were also issuing registration and issuing plates. Well, as you know, the customer's out the door with those plates. That's authority to operate the motor vehicle. So they're not really so much interested at this point. And so what would happen is that when the Department of Revenue would receive those mailed in correspondence, they would maybe identify some issues with that title application. Not that it wasn't an illegitimate transaction, some of them were, but we would reach back out to the county treasurer and say, you need more information, right? Well, the problem is that the customer didn't really have much of an incentive to cooperate until they wanted to sell the vehicle, right? So that left us in 2012 with about 1 million title records that were in between. So the benefit for us, the Department of Revenue, is that, and the county treasurers took this work on, is they said, we will basically do all the title review process. And now we built some tools into the system to help them. And we also gave them scanning technology at the time, but that also put a lot of work on the county treasurers. Because as you all know, vehicle title transactions are probably, you deal with some very highly evolved entrepreneurs. When those customers, those, private sale, in the advertisement in the newspaper. So the county treasurers, they have to deal with specialized sales tax issues from the vehicle dealers. They have, basically you have to decide what situs the sales tax is going to be remitted. And that's unique. It's separate and distinct from what we deal with in streamlined sales with regard to the majority of sales tax. County treasurers have to have a special understanding of that. Also with private party transactions, sometimes they have to deal with issues of sales, the amount of the vehicle purchase not being as high as it should be. There's also distribution that is specific to vehicles of sales tax between local and counties that's complicated. In addition, you've got security interests and you're dealing with banks who basically, at one time they have an assignment on the back of the title, but that's not really the reality. The reality is the bank also has to file a notice of security interest that is asynchronous. It's not sent in at the same time as the title application or the title assignment. That's something a treasurer in the state of Kansas has to factor in. And the scariest part for us also is the private sales. The great thing about dealer sales is they're regulated and our dealers do a great job. The problem with private sales, where there's no dealer involved, is sometimes someone's paying cash for a bill of sale. And that transaction is not going to go anywhere with us or with our county treasurers. And that created the problems. So fast forward to 2012, we basically moved a lot of those responsibilities of approving titles to county treasurers, and they've been dealing with that work. And we've been supporting them, but the idea is that we want to try to approve the title before the customer walks out with a plate or gets a plate mailed to them, so that the customer has an incentive to participate in making sure the title transaction's legit. But you also have your written testimony. It just points out that our relationship with county treasurers doing this work goes back to 1929, right? It started with the county treasurers doing the title work. Also, I'll point out again that at that time, the registration fee was $5. So you can think it hasn't changed that much over those 95 years of us having a relationship with them. If you have any more questions, I'll stand at the end of all the testimony.
All right, committee. Do we have any questions for any of the conferees? Representative Helgerson.
Thank you very much. Basically, this is $16 million we're giving to the counties. Is that correct? I don't know who wants to stand for questions. I have several.
Yes, the way the bill stands right now, it would, the allocation would switch, and the fiscal note does say 16 million would go to the counties. That is correct.
Do we have any audited expenses from the counties as to how much it costs?
All I have is the survey that we gave out to our county treasurers to give us information as to how much the motor vehicle fund it's costing them to operate their motor vehicle funds.
There are special fees that certain counties have put on their local facilities.
The facility fee, yes.
I would like, is there any audited figures out there that say how much it actually costs them to do that? Are they breaking even or making more? Are they losing money, and how much?
I mean, I can't say it's audited, but I can tell you, like for my county, I calculated exactly how much it costs to run the motor vehicle operating, just my motor vehicle staff. And according to, Riley County was about, from what we collect about $350,000 in revenues, but it costs our county about 700. I'm trying to get to my notes. Sorry, I have to find my Riley County number here. $415,000 was what we were in the hole for 2024, compared to what it cost and what the revenues that we brought in.
That's what you presented to the county?
Pardon?
That's what you presented to the county, that you lost
Yes.
$1,000? If I could have some background information about that, it would be very helpful.
Sure.
What each county lost, et cetera. This document that says vehicle age. Are you sure you mean age?
And I think that's just part of the amendment, Representative. I don't think that's the section that they're amending on Senator Bauer's testimony.
Because it's very similar to vehicle numbers, and from 1 to 3, 4 to 6, there are certain fees that go on the higher the trucks, and that's why I was asking. If we decided to give the $16 million to the counties, county basically is going to make you whole, but then that means any money is going back to the county for additional services or whatever.
May I? So, and I'll just, once again, I'll just use Riley County as an example. If we get this additional funding, we would be able to actually not use as much money out of the general fund to fund motor vehicle. So right now, my entire salary of all of my employees are paid out of the general fund. We collect the revenues for doing motor vehicle work, and then at the end of the year, I do a transfer back to pay back the county for the motor vehicle staff that they have funded. However, the amount that I'm transferring back to the general fund does not cover the amount of my entire motor vehicle staff. Does that help?
Last question. And I appreciate your patience, and if I can be real difficult.
No, not at all.
Most of the people in here know. Yeah, I love you too, man. Sitting on the tax committee, if someone came to us and asked us for $16 million that's going to the county, we'd be specifically saying, well, is that additional $1 million that's going to the county, and what are we going to see in direct property tax reduction? I don't know where this is going, but that's a question I think it's going to be either talked about here, talked about in conference committee, or talked about on the House floor, maybe all those places. That's a real question and concern, because we are actually creating more money above your, from what I understand, from what your actual costs are, and then we're going to give it to the counties.
No, I don't want to disagree.
If I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, okay, so no, what we're saying right now is we're underfunded about $11 million across the state for 2024. If we get $11 million, that's going to fund motor vehicle costs that are currently being funded by ad valorem tax dollars. This isn't above what our costs are. We're not able to cover our costs.
And then the $11 million will go back, or $16 million will go back to the counties for additional spending.
I don't know how to answer that. Okay. No.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this might best be for the senator, if she's willing. But I noticed in Mr. Smith's testimony, he did talk about the actual titling fees and how they haven't been increased since 2003. I was just wondering if that was a discussion that was had in terms of possibly increasing the titling fees in a commensurate amount to make up that SGF funds, or what that conversation might have been.
Thank you. That is a sticky wicket in the Senate, because raising fees is raising a tax, and it just kind of stops right there. So this is a different avenue we haven't explored before, and in fact, we hadn't really discussed it. So it's kind of a unique way in that this fund we learned from 2012. I think a fee increase is a non-starter in the Senate, and that's sad, because you have passed over bills to us. I actually like last year's bills where the treasurers had one lump fee and it included everything, but it was an increase. That seemed very simple to me and for the treasurers to use. So that's where the Senate side is, and I'm the carrier of the bill because I have 14 counties, and I have a great relationship with the treasurers and the state, that I'm a car dealer myself. So I have a lot of interaction with the county treasurers. So I understand what they are trying to do here, but here's just a different way to approach it. And we'll see if we're successful in the Senate today on the floor. And I'll go to caucus as soon as we're done here, and we'll scope it out to see if this is the path they would like to take.
Thank you, Senator. That's helpful context. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and I might just add on to what she said, and Jill and Chris could correct me, but I think we passed out a fee increase bill for the treasurers 3 times over the last number of years, and it always kind of stops in the other body.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that 6 years they've been trying for a solution of some sort. Of course, when we say property tax relief, that would go through our county commissioners to actually reduce. That's not something we can do, so hopefully they would see that in their mill levy as well. I see it as a backfill right now.
Any other questions, committee? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get this all straight in my mind. I know that Treasurer Hager, in her testimony, stated that this provides additional funding to the county without adding any additional fees to the customer. So I guess my question is it's a reshuffling of funds, and whose ox is getting gored in this case?
Well, so right now, the way the bill is the 16 million comes out of the highway fund. The amendment they found about 12 million. So we're actually, will then eventually have to adjust what we were asking for to match that $12 million, so that so the Department of Revenue remains whole, the highway fund remains whole, the counties get some relief. They don't get everything that they were asking for, but it's a compromise that we were willing to make to get the bill passed.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
If you got a second, I think maybe Mr. White wants to talk about the axe scoring.
I appreciate the question and actually how it was asked, but so the proposed amendment, obviously the underlying bill, the highway fund was the axing. With the proposed amendment, the treasurers are only getting about 75% of what they had requested. The highway fund is going to take a slight haircut of a cut. And so those are the two things. I think it's a compromise at this point that really is about as fair and reasonable as we can get. Raising fees just isn't palatable in both chambers. And so this is the best that we could come up with to try to get the treasurers some relief for the time being.
Representative Helgerson.
Mike, but you didn't say the magic, and that is, you and I have had this discussion for 20 years, and that's the state general fund. And in tax committee, I continually argue that what you're doing, even though it's an easy way to take money, you're taking $12 million from the highway fund. Well, then it doesn't go to water, education, social services, or anything else. I could be just as easy and have an amendment that says $12 million, and we expect it to be taken out of the Department of Revenue for efficiency. I like that, those tomatoes. $12 million is $12 million, whether you're not taking it from, our bank account or the highway fund. And, that's why I get a little irritated about it. Sorry.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, Representative Helgerson's correct. We've been talking at great length. So as this committee is fully well aware, we get 18% of sales tax that's raised in the state of Kansas for infrastructure at KDOT, their operations as well as for infrastructure. Of that, not all 18% goes to fund KDOT and fund infrastructure. There's probably, I'm going to say, off the top of my head, rough numbers, that raises about $700 million for the highway fund, maybe 750, somewhere in that range. And Joel, correct me if I'm off, but I think the transfer out this year is proposed at 146. So of the 700 million, about 150 of it's going out to fund operations like the Highway Patrol, Department of Revenue, and just a few other things. So what we are trying to attempt to do here, in my opinion, is these are registration fees that for reasons well before my time have been going to the state general fund. So to us, this is the way that we try to fund the treasurer's operation, who they're collecting a lot of these, they're collecting probably 85% of the registration fees collected in the state of Kansas as we stand here today. That it's done at that local level. And so to us, this is a reasonable way. And Representative Helgerson's correct. This will be a roughly $11.2 million hit to the state general fund. That is, those numbers will be adjusted in the state general fund. You're absolutely correct.
Any other questions? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your presentations. I'd like to have Mr. Ted Smith come on.
Yes, Representative Ted Smith.
We've known each other a few years from Revenue. In part of your testimony, you were talking about fees charged, and that I believe you said 9 states nationwide charge less than Kansas and the surrounding states around. Is that correct? Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah, that in my research preparing for this hearing, and the interesting thing about that, Representative, is that some of those states that are below us, they probably have service fees or other fees that are basically associated with the transaction that I didn't find in my research. Colorado's a good example. They may charge less than us on registration fees, but they have this neat little program where they collect $14 or $15 to pay for local highway in lieu of motor fuels. So yeah, we are in the low percentage.
Okay, so here's the question. I have a constituent, and he calls me up almost every year. And he says, Representative Weigel, there are people living, where I'm not going to say where he lives. He lives in the 56th district, and they have, I believe he said they're all Texas tagged vehicles, cars and trucks. And he says, they are living here 12 months out of the year, just like I'm living here 12 months out of the year, but yet they're tagged, all those vehicles are tagged in Texas. And so I did some checking, and I actually called the trooper, and I said, can you go run these, and just see, what's going on? And, he came back, he told me a little bit about what was going on. I said, is this a problem? I was talking to the trooper, and he says, I've heard the same thing you're hearing from people that he's probably stopped on the highway. But one of the things that, and I can't remember if it was this constituent of mine or if it was somebody else, because that piqued my interest when you said 9 that are less. And I'll just throw this out here. I'm going to say it was one or maybe both of the Dakotas were actually advertising, we don't care what state you're in, living in, send this up here and we'll title your vehicle for $25. No questions asked. Is that something that's actually going on? I mean, have you heard this before?
Yeah, I hear it all the time from the county treasurers, because that's another one of their responsibilities, is to see all these high-value assets that aren't registered in their counties that they're maybe supposed to collect on, like recreational vehicles, Winnebagos. But getting back to your issue with Texas, they may have a higher registration fee, but they may have much reduced property taxes, right? So in Kansas, we collect property taxes with the registration. So it's a little bit complicated. It's sort of apples and oranges with a lot of other states where it's just the title and registration fees.
Yeah, I understand all that, but when you say that there's 9 states that charge fees for titling and registration less than Kansas, and I've heard from this constituent consistently that it's either Texas, and then I found out that it may have been one of the Dakotas. In fact, I think he showed me a flyer or something. Maybe it was on a magazine. They flat out said something like, "Go ahead and we don't care what state you're living in, where title and get it up there." I'm asking if that's true. Don't they have basically the same costs as we have here in Kansas for titling and registration? I mean,
Yeah,
they have to have people working in the DMV or the county offices, treasurer offices. They have to process the same type of vehicles in the same way. Where's the rub? I think it's somebody whose ox is being gored. I like that phrase. But I'm just throwing that out there and see if there's any validity to what I've been hearing.
So in my testimony, I talk about title fees, right? Those are caught one time when the vehicle changes ownership. We do about 800,000 to 900,000 of them a year with the county treasurers, right? That's what I was talking about in the sense of those fees. Then you got the yearly registration fee that also gets paid, and that may be different. I don't know where we rate as it relates to registration fees. But talking about Texas, this is a topic of interest to me. It's a little bit easier in Texas to title a vehicle because they have bonded titles. Whereas if I'm not so sure about whether I got legal right to it, and Texas is sort of saying, I don't know, what they'll do is they'll request a bonded title. Kansas doesn't permit that, thankfully. And that puts a little bit more work on our county treasurers to make sure they do it right. And that's where the work is on these, is on the initial title transaction, not so much on the vehicle registrations.
Okay, getting
right.
back to.
Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Representing Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I need to defend the county treasurers here a little bit. We've talked all around this issue. County treasurers act as agents for the Department of Revenue and have been doing this service for years. Looks like in '24, you're losing about $11.2 million, which basically is property tax that the locals collect to provide a service for the state of Kansas. Out of total fairness, I don't know, who's ox getting gored here? I think we can do better, and I've seen this bill about 4 years in a row or something similar to it. I think we need to seriously look at it. I do have a little problem occasionally on how some counties receive these funds, what they do receive from the Department of Revenue and how it's handled within the Treasurer's office. I think there's some things that we maybe need to look at there, but I think it's long past time that our committee and over in the Senate take up something that can actually work. This is one of the better solutions that I've seen. And I appreciate the local units of government that have done a lot of services for the state of Kansas. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I've got just a couple. Shiloh, can you help me? Did you compile this information pretty much, or?
Yes.
Okay.
But our committee did, yes.
Okay, so I believe in your testimony, and help me with this. You said 30% of the counties would not be made whole by the original bill, I guess. Is that right? Was that going to be in 2029, or was that 30% would not be made whole today?
In 2029, but I'd have to go back and extrapolate. I've got the other columns hidden. I can get you that information, but it was pretty close. It was about 30%.
But that was extrapolating out to 2029.
Also in '24, though, I think we still had about 30 counties that were, even in '24, we're still going to be negative.
And then the thing that you sent us as far as the funding analysis by county, I know that you've got the registration fee in there, the registration fee increase. You don't have the certificate of title increase in that, do you?
I knew we were going to have to be making that adjustment, and so that's the piece that we're going to let go, was the title piece. This was just showing the registration, which still is a $14 million hit. And so we knew we were going to have to then adjust from that number.
So there would be additional funding coming in with the bill, even as it's been amended somewhat. And do you know how many certificate of titles you guys are done across the state in a year, roughly?
I believe that was in the fiscal note from the 842,000 titles across the state.
So it'd be about, based on the increase in the bill, it would be about another $1.2 million
That's where,
go towards the projected loss, right?
yes, that the $16 million hit included the $5 for each registration and the extra $1.50 for every title. If we got rid of the $1.50 for the titles, we're down to a $14 million hit, and then we knew then we were still going to have to bring that registration amount down to a certain number to hit the 12 million. That is going to be transferred from the state general fund.
So so right now your projected loss through 2029 is 13 million. The bill as it's written right now, or with the amendment, raises 12 million. Okay, all right. I'm just trying to make sure my math's right and I understand what all the pieces are. All right. Is there any other questions? If not, I do want to thank the county treasurers for their testimony today. You know, sometimes the county treasurers are all elected by the people in their communities, and I appreciate your work and service to the members of our communities. And with that, if there's no further business for the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.